The story kicks off with Frank White, a big-time drug boss, walking out of prison after serving his sentence for dealing. As soon as he's out, a fancy car rolls up with his 2 female bodyguards, Rhea and Melanie, ready to pick him up. When Frank gets back to his old stomping grounds, he's pretty upset to see how much worse things have gotten. The place looks rough, and that just fuels his drive to take back control. He's got his eyes set on running New York's underworld again, and he plans to wipe out the gangs and dealers who've been running things while he was locked up, including dangerous groups like the Colombians and the Triads. Elsewhere in the city, Emilio L. Zappa, a key guy in a Colombian sex trafficking ring, walks into a phone booth, probably not expecting trouble. But out of nowhere, he gets lit up in a spray of bullets. His killers grab a suitcase he had and take off, leaving his body with a newspaper lying beside it that talks about Frank's release from prison. Meanwhile, in a hotel nearby, Jimmy Jump is working out a coke deal with a Colombian boss named King Tito. Jimmy talks a mile a minute, which clearly gets on Tito's nerves. Out of nowhere, Tito bumps up the price by 10%, throwing Jimmy off. With no choice, Jimmy agrees and offers a suitcase as payment. But when Tito opens it, surprise, it's full of tampons. Chaos breaks out, and Jimmy and his crew pull guns and wipe out Tito and all his men before anyone can react. After that bloody mess, Jimmy and his guys head to the Plaza Hotel, where they meet up with Frank. It turns out Frank was the one pulling all the strings behind Zappa's murder, and Jimmy's team carried it out. Jimmy's thrilled to see Frank back in charge and tells him the Colombians have been handled, and their money and stuff have been taken too. With those rivals out of the picture, Frank's firmly back on top. They all celebrate his return like royalty. Jimmy says he's been waiting for this moment forever and is truly happy to see Frank free. But Frank's still bitter that Jimmy never came to see him during his time in prison. Jimmy says he just couldn't bear to see his king behind bars, trying to smooth things over. Later on, Frank heads to dinner with his lawyer, Jennifer, and his right-hand man, Joey Delicio. Over the meal, Frank tells Joey to set up a meeting with Artie Clay, a big Mafia figure. After dinner, Frank and Jennifer ride the subway together and end up sharing a passionate kiss, suggesting they had something going on before prison. During the ride, a few guys try to mug them, but Frank casually shows them he's packing heat, which scares them off. Instead of hurting them, he throws them some cash and tells them to find him at the plaza if they want real work. Soon after, Joey heads to Little Italy to deliver Frank's message to Artie Clay, who's in the middle of a poker game and not in the mood for visitors. Joey explains Frank's offer, but Clay isn't having it. He says he refuses to deal with anyone who does business with black people and says he'll stick with the Colombians. As a final insult, Clay literally pees on Joey's shoes and tells him to send that message back to Frank. Frank doesn't take the insult lightly. He, Jimmy, and the crew show up at Clay's spot not long after. Frank tells Clay he wanted a cut of his profits, arguing that while he was in prison, the Mafia got rich. Now it's his turn. Clay mocks him, and without hesitation, Frank shoots him dead. Before walking out, he tells Clay's men they're welcome to work for him if they want. Later, Frank goes to an opera and meets with the mayor. He pushes the mayor to keep a hospital running in a poor neighborhood. The mayor says the city can't afford it, so Frank offers to pay for it himself. The mayor throws out a ridiculous number, $16 million by the end of the quarter, which ticks Frank off. He sees it as another scheme to screw over the poor while keeping the rich areas cushy. That night, Frank is suddenly grabbed by 3 narcotics detectives, Roy Bishop, Dennis Gilley, and Thomas Flanagan. They drive him to a remote area and pop open their trunk, showing him Zappa's corpse. They try to get him to confess. When Frank refuses, Thomas takes a swing at him, but Frank fights back and almost wins. Dennis pulls a gun, and things get heated, but Roy manages to cool it down. With no real evidence, they leave Frank behind. Not long after, Frank sends Joey to Chinatown to talk to Larry Wong, a triad boss watching a movie in a theater. Wong's sitting on $15 million worth of cocaine and tells Joey he wants $3 million up front and another $500,000 once the stuff is sold. Later, Frank meets Larry at a hospital in a mostly black neighborhood and tries to strike a deal, a 50-50 split. But Larry says no and tells Frank he needs to decide on the spot if he's buying or not. Frank walks away. The next morning, Jimmy and a few of Frank's guys swing by a fast food joint to grab something to eat. While they're there, Jimmy spots an old lady with her grandkids and hands her some cash, just being generous. But as they're about to leave, cops roll up out of nowhere and arrest the whole crew for murdering the Colombians. Turns out one of Tito's bodyguards didn't die and is now ready to talk. Back at the plaza, Frank gets the bad news and quickly tells his lawyers to get moving. That night, Jennifer manages to get them all out. When detectives Roy, Dennis, and Thomas show up and see Jimmy walking free, they're furious, but there's nothing Roy can do about it. Later in Chinatown, Frank and his guys hit back hard, going after the triads in a ruthless ambush. They take out most of the gang, snatch up Larry Wong, and force him to spill the location of his stash. After killing him, they find over 200 pounds of coke hidden inside big containers of MSG at his warehouse. A few days later, Frank uses the drug money to fix up a struggling hospital in a poor black neighborhood. During a public event, he's praised on TV for helping the community. The cops watching are disgusted. Dennis rants that while Frank lives like royalty, they barely scrape by on their salaries. He's convinced the system protects rich criminals like Frank. Dennis then suggests they just kill Frank and make it look like a gang hit. Roy doesn't exactly support the idea, but Dennis doesn't care. He's going through with it. One night, Frank's crew is living it up in a club while Frank steps away to make a call. Joey shows up with a buyer from LA. After testing the product, the buyer agrees to pay $12 million, but only half now, half later. Frank shuts that down and demands full payment up front. The buyer then suggests leaving one of his guys behind while he goes to get the cash. But as they're heading out, he pulls a gun and shoots one of Frank's guards, revealing Joey has set them up. Within seconds, a group of heavily armed men rush the place, and chaos erupts. As bullets fly, Frank helps Jimmy get out to a car, but one of the attackers jumps on the vehicle. During the scuffle, Jimmy tears off the attacker's mask. It's a cop. Frank swerves into a fire extinguisher stand on the sidewalk and kills him. Dennis and Thomas, who saw their fellow officer die, immediately start chasing them. A wild car chase kicks off across the Queensboro Bridge. Frank and Jimmy return fire, and by the end of it, every cop involved is dead, except Dennis and Thomas. Once they lose them, Frank and Jimmy split up. Jimmy eventually corners Thomas and shoots him in the chest. The bullet gets through his vest, but before Jimmy can get away, Dennis shows up and shoots him dead, finishing it with a bullet to the head. At Thomas's funeral, Dennis is drowning in guilt and can't even stay through the whole service. He heads to his car, trying to keep it together. Suddenly, another car pulls up beside him. The window rolls down. It's Frank. Without saying a word, Frank shoots Dennis and drives off like nothing happened. Later, at the plaza, Frank confronts Joey, who's now tied up by Frank's men. Joey keeps saying he's sorry, but Frank demands to know why he turned on him. Joey admits the cops promised him money and a spot in witness protection. Frank doesn't say much. He just coldly tells his guys to bury Joey, along with the bribe money, ignoring all his begging. With Joey gone, Frank heads to Roy's place and catches him off guard. He points a gun at him and makes him cuff himself to a chair. Frank calmly tells Roy that he's put a $250,000 bounty on every cop chasing him. He says the people he killed, Tito, Larry, Clay, Zappa, were all involved in trafficking women and kids, something he claims even he couldn't ignore. Then Frank takes off for the subway. Roy manages to break free and chases after Frank. The final showdown happens inside a subway car. Both have their guns drawn. Frank grabs a random person as a shield, and a shootout breaks out. Roy ends up getting killed. Wounded and bleeding, Frank stumbles out, catches a cab in Times Square, and slumps inside, clutching his side. As the police close in on the cab, Frank goes completely still. It's unclear if he's dead or alive.